Hello and welcome to Good Enough Chats, the podcast on a mission to destigmatise men's mental health challenges, one chat at a time. I am Dan Boucher, the host and producer of the show, and before we jump into the episode, I just wanted to give you a quick heads up about what this conversation's all about. So I'm joined in this discussion by Chris Frederick, a two-time suicide survivor who has made his mission destigmatising men's mental health and suicidal ideation. And he is now contributing all of his experience, all of his insight into research, into advocacy work, into sharing his lived experiences in the interest of helping other people. It is an incredibly powerful conversation. It goes to, as this kind of opener would suggest, it goes to some pretty dark places, but it's also full of hope. And there is levity in this discussion. You will hear us chatting, laughing, as well as talking about those kind of really challenging, difficult situations that Chris has been through. So I really passionately believe that this is an important topic to talk about. We shouldn't be skirting around it. And I also think that this particular episode is useful because it is the first time that I've had a guest on the show who's black, and we get to talk about the specific challenges that are faced by black men. If we think that the men's mental health arena is underserved, within that there are areas, communities of people who are underserved even more. And Chris is doing some amazing work to try and change that. So it's going to be a tricky conversation, but I think it's a really important conversation to have. And without further ado, let's jump into it. Chris, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Very well, sir. Good to see you.
Excellent. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here. I'm loving the Mandalorian t-shirts, and 100% we will be talking a little bit about Star Wars in the course of this.
I should hope so.
But so for benefit of anybody listening in on this, we are recording before May the 4th, which is a pivotal day in the Star Wars calendar, I'm reliably assured.
Yes.
And I'm sure we'll touch on this as well, but Chris has got more than a little bit of interest in Star Wars.
Absolutely. Well, just as a quick one, before I came up with the mental health Jedi badge, the name for my sort of, alter ego, if you will, my buddy in Hong Kong said, "Why don't you call yourself the Mindalorian?" And I was like, "Dude, I love it. But do you think we'll get away copyright?" It's no, definitely not. Disney will be after me. It's just too close to the Mandalorian. But I did like the idea.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Chris, for our audience, would you mind introducing yourself? So, like name, age, where you live, shoe size, first record you bought, whatever you want to go with.
Yeah. Okay. So, Chris Frederick, living in northwest London, turned 55 back in January. I was at the hospital last week finishing my sleep study, and they had to weigh me. And I said to the lady, "I haven't done this for about 2 years." And when I saw the dial creeping up, I now know why I hadn't weighed myself for 2 years. So, needless to say, there's a lot of work needs to be done on that side. But yeah, no. I don't know what else you'd like to know. Born in London, not living too far away from where I was born, actually, having spent 20 years in Asia and sort of come full circle, and back here, I suspect, for the rest of my life. Yeah.
Nice. And pre-recording, we were talking about the fact that you are an Arsenal fan, a Gunner, and as we are recording today, it is the day of the second leg of the Real Madrid tie, isn't it? So
Sure is.
3-0 up after the leg.
Yeah.
How are you feeling?
Well, obviously those two freak free kicks last week, which will go down in living memory. I mean, also in the same week, and I don't know if you're a snooker fan, Dan, but I am, and obviously it's the prelims to the World Championships, which start, I
Right.
think, next week. And the Welsh guy, I forget his name, but the Welsh guy, he did two 147s in the same match about 3 or 4 days ago. Never been done in snooker history, and I've yet to watch it on YouTube. So it's been an extraordinary time for freak sport activity. But going back to your question, I mean, Arsenal will have to do that and more tonight to win, in Spain. Unfortunately, I won't get to see it live, but I will be keeping fingers and toes crossed for them.
Yeah. I will keep my fingers and toes crossed for you. As a Sheffield Wednesday fan, I have zero interest in the Premier League. Uh, so, but obviously, British clubs, I like to see them do well in Europe.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, Chris, let's jump into question number one,
Hmm.
which is why are you here today sharing your lived experiences of mental health?
Well, the fact is, Dan, I shouldn't be here. I've attempted suicide twice,
Mm.
and somebody once said to me, Chris, maybe your heart wasn't in it. That's why you failed. Interesting observation, right? But my best friend in LA said to me, Chris, it's not your time. Clearly, God has got some kind of mission purpose for you. That's why you failed. That's why you're still here. And the fact that I'm here has been, it's been a hell of a journey, Dan, to get to that kind of breaking point, but also, what happened since then and what's continuing to happen in terms of my life and my journey and my renewed purpose
Mm.
has been quite extraordinary. So, I love talking to guys like you and, whether it's podcast or panels or writing, blogging, there's a story to be told.
Mm.
But it's not just mine. I love hearing other people's stories. And I realized when I was a kid why I loved acting. I played in, I was like always got the lead part in the end of year school play. And my mum always thought, Chris, you've got really nice singing voice and you've got quite a nice stage presence. And I was like, yeah, mum, whatever. And now I realize actually I'm a bit of a storyteller
Mm.
and I quite like that. And because it's about something so meaningful as well. It's really, gives a lot of energy and a lot of purpose to my life. Yeah. Gets me out of bed in the morning. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll bet it does. I'll bet it does. And we're going to talk at length about your your personal mental health journey in this conversation. What I'd like to ask you to do now, for the benefit of the guys that are listening to this, that they're not familiar with you at all, could you talk us about that, your purpose, Project Soul Stride, and what you do?
Yeah. So, you know, I was after the summer of 21. So that was after the second attempt. I went through a really sort of rigorous period of therapy and getting sort of guidance. You must remember this was during COVID.
Mm.
So I didn't really have a lot of access to people. And that really shone a light on the whole loneliness and social isolation piece, which I was already dealing with, but then it was just compounded. And fast forward to the summer of 23, I realized that I'd been out of therapy for about 6 months and I was just beginning to feel as though I was kind of slipping back into some really bad habits. For example, I know I'm not alone because there are going to be men out there who will get what I'm about to say, but not getting out of bed,
Mm.
not washing for like a week, not brushing your teeth for like a week, ordering takeout and not going down to the kitchen, which is our social area in our shared house where you get to talk to people,
Yeah.
just basically avoiding people's phone calls, text messages. I realized I was in risk here. And these patterns were sort of quite well recognized in my brain. So I woke up one morning and I sat here, Dan, literally with a blank sheet of paper and I just started doodling. I just started scribbling. And the question I was asking myself is, what can I do to get my arse out of bed? That was the whole question. So I was like, okay, I've got all these skills. I've got a story. I'm prolific at networking. I've got a massive LinkedIn network. There's got to be something I can do with this. So I threw all of these into ChatGPT, and I
Mm,
just started using that at the time. So I wasn't quite expert at it as I am now. And I said, right, I want to do a 3 month project that will force me to speak to people, see people on the screen, force me to do a lot of writing because I love writing, and just get me out of bed for at least 3 or 4 hours a day. What do you reckon? And
mm,
it said, okay, why don't you do like this lived experience story where you speak to 30 people, tell them your story, get feedback, and find out from them how they perceive the mental health sector. So I was like, yeah, I could do that. And then, so I got on started getting onto LinkedIn, sent out some really lovely messages. Loads of people started responding. That list of 30 then doubled, then
mm,
tripled. And what became 3 months, Dan, ended up lasting 16 months. And what started as 30, I ended up doing 185 interviews over 15, 16 months. And when I spoke to some people, they said to me, Chris, there's a name for this. So what is it? Said it's called the snowball effect.
mm.
So what is that? What was like is that like a funny term? No, actually, it's an academic research term that what you're doing is it's just growing and growing and growing, and people are just referring more and more people to you. And so it was by pure luck, Dan, that I fell across this formula where it wasn't academic, but I was approaching it in a systematic way. And I was holding these very serious conversations, writing lots of notes. So that became like a data analytical piece. I was synthesizing all of this data and recognizing the key themes. And now I'm able to push those themes out into real world stories
Mm.
and research and things that people, your everyday person will understand it. A blog, a funny story, a comment. And, Project Soulstride has become a real big deal now.
Yeah.
It's got a huge following and it's growing every month. And I'm just so proud of it, and I do it all on my own, Dan, from this bedroom.
Yeah.
I don't see anybody. I probably spend 95% of the time on my own, but I still somehow manage to do all this productive work.
When you're doing, and it is incredible what you've done and what you've built, but when you're doing that and spending so much time on your own, is that kind of is part of your um, approach to how you're doing it to try and reduce that 95% to get you out in front of more people in having those real world conversations with people because
It, it,
it's going to have a positive knock on effect on you, isn't it, as well, doing that?
you know what? It is a very, very good question because I'm being completely honest with you now. Because I've gotten so comfortable in my own space, and because I know I'm getting lots of recognition and kudos from the work that I do, the need to go out and see people physically um, has become less of a priority for me.
Yeah,
I'm not saying that that's right.
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
not saying that's right at all. But you know what? I mean, at my age, here are the disadvantages. I'm on universal credit, so I don't have anything meaningful in the way of expendable income, right? And to do anything kind of cool, you need a bit of cash. I live in a shared house. I don't have a lot of resources, and I'm 55. My health isn't great, so I don't really spend. Even if I go for a walk, it's usually for about half an hour to 45 minutes, and then I come home and I'm actually quite exhausted.
Mm,
So I'm not trying to make up any excuses here. I'm just saying that that's the way that things have actually worked out for me. And if that's all I ever end up doing, I'm okay with that. Yeah.
yeah. But
As you know,
what you're doing is amazing and
yeah,
awesome. But it's just as you were describing it, I was thinking, but is that like good for you? Is the balance like right for you to ensure that you're looking after yourself because you're looking after so many other people and you're
yeah,
doing such an amazing job of sort of campaigning and championing and advocating.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's easy to kind of forget the you bit in the middle of it.
Yeah.
Make
Yeah.
sure that you're all right, isn't it?
No, I know. I mean, actually, I subconsciously, when I started this advocacy journey, I because I come from the private sector, so I'm all about results. I'm all about cadences, KPIs, and because I was in sales and business development, it was all about speed. And I
Yeah,
realized when I got started, I accelerated my work so quickly. I actually started to burn out, and it happened twice. And I had to take a step back for about 2 months. So lessons learned there was I really had to just slow. So to your point, I really had to slow things down and pace myself. So rather than having 10 conference calls a week, I'd reduce that to five.
yeah,
Right. And just give myself time to just rest. And rest for me is moving from this desk to my bed, because I have no other chair, to my bed and watching. I have no TV. I watch everything on my iPad and literally just lie down and watch TV and go to sleep. Or in the afternoon, always watch EastEnders reruns every afternoon between 1 and 2:30. Certain things, must be done.
yeah,
But so if I describe this, people say, Chris, it doesn't sound too healthy. And I'm not, I say I don't disagree, because my blood pressure's gone up, my weight's gone up, my limbs are feeling a lot stiffer because I don't do enough exercise. And this year I'm doing something quite different, Dan, and I'd love to talk to you about it in the autumn. But I'm actually taking from July and September, July, August. I'm taking 2 months off from social media. I've never done it before, and I said to myself in January, I need to spend the summer outside.
yeah,
This will be the year where I'm going to force myself to spend at least an hour or two outside. And if that just means sitting in the park with a book on a bench, or doing some exercise, or even volunteering to walk somebody's dog,
yeah,
I've
yeah,
got to get out. There's a library up the road, because I'm in northwest London, in Scrubs Lane. So there's White Way, the White City shopping mall. They've got a lovely library there. I said, look, even if I take my laptop and my work and study, but don't do it in this room, take it on the bus to the library,
yeah.
just to be somewhere different, and then get on the bus and come home. That actually will be quite a big deal for me.
Yeah, but that's it. It's sometimes, because I've found this myself. It's the change of scene
Yeah,
that makes the difference. So
yeah,
I found like I could be trying to work through something, trying to a piece of work for some of my clients, and I could be staring at it for 2 hours,
mm,
making no headway whatsoever.
mhm,
If I just pack my computer up and go down to the cafe and have
mhm,
a coffee,
mhm,
different environment, different
yeah,
energy around me, all of a sudden I can crack it.
yeah,
And it's amazing. We forget how really small things
yeah,
have such a massive impact. And you have already described, like, you're aware of
yeah,
when things are kind of working for you or not working for you. That's
yeah,
why you started doing this, because you realized that you needed to make some changes, right?
yeah, yes,
It's amazing how much of a positive impact it can have, but it's also amazing how easy it is to not see what's really obvious right in front of us
yeah,
at times,
yeah,
isn't it?
yeah,
You just kind of you get the blinkers on
yeah,
and you just don't realize, and then it takes a while, and then suddenly you go, oh, okay, I probably need to go and get a bit more fresh air, or I
yes,
just going and sitting in a different place.
yes, yes,
It's a big for me. It's running.
mm,
So I don't run fast. I don't aim to win races.
mm,
I in fact I don't enter many races at all. I just know that if on a regular basis I'm going out and doing some running,
mm,
then I'm better.
yeah,
In my head, I am better off.
yeah,
And it took me quite a long time to realize that it was the act of running that was the thing that mattered, not
mm.
running faster or running further or
Are
any.
we quite a similar age then?
I'm 46,
Okay, all right,
so
okay,
yeah, just sort of 10 years between us, 9, 10 years between us.
yeah, yeah,
But it took me a while to work out those little things. But once I clocked that it was the kind of the small changes
yeah,
the incremental thing. And I literally mean, in saying that, I literally mean the whole getting out of bed in the morning thing.
Yeah.
I can really relate to that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not being able to physically get out of the bed, not having the will to do that, just like for weeks, just going, I can't, I just can't.
Yeah.
And then seeing, well, actually, if tomorrow I get up and I go downstairs and I make a cup of tea,
Uh-huh.
that's progress.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
if I turn back the clock to when I was your age, I was living in Singapore in a beautiful condo, and literally, and my girlfriend at the time was a yoga instructor. So literally, we would get up in the morning at 6:30 and we would do power yoga by the pool. As the sun was coming up, and then we'd either jump in the pool and swim directly afterwards, or was going to the sauna. Then we get changed for work, and then after work we'd walk home, and then I'd play tennis on the weekend and swim on the weekend. So that sort of lifestyle, my weight was always very trim. I was always very active. And literally, the moment I came back to England, everything just stopped
Mm,
because to do that, to have that, so it's impossible to have that kind of lifestyle really, unless you are like quite seriously cashed up
mm,
and you've got access to these facilities. But if you're totally on your own, you really do have to be quite creative in what
yeah,
else you can do, and my physical, I mean, I had a benign tumor removed from my left thigh about 15 years ago. So I have no muscle in my left leg. So I can't run anymore. So for me, even walking, I have to be very deliberate about how long I go for.
yeah,
The 10,000 steps, no way. I couldn't do that every day, but I could probably do five. So for those 2 months where I switch off all social media, I'm really going to be very conscious in tracking what I do and also how I'm dealing with the loneliness aspect, because there was a really interesting article came out on the weekend from The Guardian, and it said people who are always on ChatGPT, me, for example, convinced themselves that they're actually not alone anymore.
yeah.
And it's right, because ChatGPT has become my buddy. Uh,
Mm,
It's one of the things I rely on. And if I were to stop using that, and I don't think I can for 2 months, but even if I did it for a few weeks, I'm really interested to see how it's going to impact me psychologically. So I shall let you know
mm.
afterwards how it all goes in that summertime. Yeah.
I'm really interested to know that, and also this is probably massively inappropriate to say this during the recording of a podcast. If during that July and August thing, I'm in London, I know I'm coming into London, I'll give you a shout and I'll see if I can kind of wheedle my way over to the northwest and maybe take you for a coffee for a distraction.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
I
We should go for a walk in Hyde Park or something like that. You see, if you're in
love that.
London,
Yeah.
anything like that. If it gets me on a bus, because I don't use the tube, because I suffer from this anxiety and also this close space. So I haven't been on the tube for about 5 years.
Mm,
And so again, I go everywhere by bus, and I usually try to limit it to two buses. So around about an hour to an hour and 15 minutes. Anything more than that, I start to really get anxious. And like I was trying to go across London a few months ago for a photography shoot, and the guy was all the way in North London somewhere. And about halfway there, I was in King's Cross or something like this. Um, I was so anxious about going to three buses and traveling for about an hour and 45 minutes that I actually started to puke. So I had to run off the bus, and I puked at the bus stop because my body was so stressed. And that's when I realized, Jesus, like is quite a serious thing.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I wasn't expecting it, but my body was saying, no, 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 you cannot travel this far. You
yeah.
can't do three buses, Chris, because it's too much for you.
It's incredible,
I
isn't it?
know. It was very odd, actually.
Like
Yeah.
a physical manifestation of
Yeah,
anxiety, like a
totally.
visceral physical manifestation.
Absolutely. So I called the guy and said, I told him what had happened. And I said, sorry, I have to cancel this photo shoot. And I sat and just started breathing. And then I got back on the bus and went home. Oh, yeah,
Wow.
amazing. Yeah.
Well, power to you for actually getting back on the bus then. I know that it was
Yeah.
the right way,
Uh-huh.
but still, you got back on the bus. I
Yeah, yeah,
mean,
yeah.
oh,
Anyway,
I feel for you, Chris. I feel for you. Um, let's kind of take a temperature check. We've sort of talked about a couple of things that have happened recently. But how has your last week been?
No, it's been good. I mean, right now, there's a lot of really positive things going on. Some nice work, some nice writing. With Star Wars month coming up last month, I've like gone through the Star Wars calendar and I've picked out the key days that I want to share content. And I've gone through my it sounds so geeky, Dan, but I don't care, right? Because I've got this photo library on my laptop, and it's probably got like 3,000 different Star Wars images. So just the joy of going through them, picking the ones for this year, and
Yeah,
then creating them through Google Photos into these beautiful reels, and then uploading them into LinkedIn with some very cool posts. And then the good thing is that LinkedIn allows you to schedule your posts. So everything is already scheduled for the whole month. So I don't need to do anything now. It's all scheduled on the key days, and you're all going to get to see there's
oh.
some magnificent content coming out next month. Truly. Yeah.
So that's a really good opportunity then. Let's give the Star Wars group a plug right now.
Yeah.
Tell our listeners, our viewers, what the name of the group is, that you're kind of managing that community, where
Yeah.
they can find it, and
Oh, for sure, man.
just
The
send some
Star
links
Wars,
there.
the LinkedIn Star Wars fans group, we're about 185 members on that group right now. I started it about a year ago. And a quick funny story. I was a member of the previous Star Wars fans group, which had been going for about 9 years.
Mm,
And it had a few thousand members. But every time I started looking at the content, I was thinking, there's a lot of people trying to sell stuff on here. There's a lot of meaningless content. And I kept going back to the person. He was based in Italy and he was the group owner.
yeah.
And I kept thinking, and I looked at his LinkedIn profile and he wasn't posting anything. I was thinking, well, that's a bit weird. So I messaged him. I messaged him directly through LinkedIn and I said, like, my name's Chris. I'm a Star Wars fan. I live in London. I would like to be a co-manager of your group, and I think I can do something really cool with this if it's something of interest. And he never responded. And
Mm,
then about a month or two later, I was on LinkedIn on my phone one night, and I saw, hold on a minute, I can't see the Star Wars fans group anymore. And I thought, oh, this Italian bloke, he's taken offence to me contacting him, so he's kicked me off the group, you see. And then I went to his profile. I couldn't find him anymore. So I realized his profile had been deleted. He probably deleted it. And it meant that the Star Wars group that he owned also just disappeared.
uh,
So it's like, hold on a minute. There's 3, 6, 7, 8,000 of us out there. We need somewhere to, hang our lightsaber kind of thing. So in one evening, I said, right, I mean, quite merciless actually, but in one evening, I was like, right, I'm going to do this myself. I'm going to restart the Star Wars fans group. And without a word of a lie, for the first week, there were two members, me and my buddy Matt in Hong Kong. And I kept inviting people but then now slowly and slowly it's built up and I post stuff. Mainly I'm the one who posts, but I do it because it's so much fun, but also it totally releases my creativity
mm.
because I mean, if you were to have a look at it, Dan, I'm not sure if you're a member, and if you're not, you need to be. But it actually, if you look at the content, it's not just about posting, this picture or posting this quote or this YouTube video. Actually, I'm writing stories. I'm connecting it to the real world. I'm referencing people's birthdays, the stars, the anniversaries. George Lucas's birthday, the day that Princess Leia, Carrie Fisher, when she died, which I believe was December 30th. I acknowledge her every year on in that group with a beautiful post dedicated to her. So for somebody, I really believe I love this aspect of my life
Yeah.
is this Star Wars group, and it actually with the mental health Jedi that is like gets signed off on all of my written work now in the public domain. People have asked me, how did you come up with it? I said, actually, I didn't. It was an author who I spoke to. She said, Chris, you've become the mental health Jedi. And I was like, oh, I like that.
I'll
I'm going
have
to keep that. And circled it. And now it's on my mind map. But people now connect with me on LinkedIn and say, Chris, I love the Star Wars aspect of your work because you're doing beautiful work on advocacy, but you're also using Star Wars as a vehicle to connect with people. And when I spoke at the House of Commons a couple of months ago, believe me, I have no shame yet. Because they said, Chris, would you like to introduce yourself to the group of MPs? I said, yeah, my name is Chris Frederick. I'm a suicide attempt survivor. I'm a lived experience advisor. I'm a global citizen, but also I'm a Star Wars fan. And the Lib Dem lady who ran that community mental health committee, she said to me, that's so cool, Chris. That's something we've got in common now. I'm also a Star Wars fan. All the MPs started to laugh. And so instantly I connected with the whole room
Yeah.
at the House of Commons. How amazing is that?
That's huge. That's huge. I think you're right with your kind of observation at the start. You're a storyteller, but you're also like what's the right word? You're like a hub, like a community, a node in the
Node. Okay. You're right.
yeah,
Yeah.
a node, not a nerd.
Yeah.
But you're kind of using those skills to yeah, to bring people together, to share those stories, and to contribute to the conversation
Yes.
in a way that gets people to listen, which is
Yes.
that's the most challenging thing, right? With
Exactly.
getting somebody to listen in a like a sea of so much other noise and competing things for your attention.
Can I read something? Can I read something to you, Dan?
Of course you can, yeah.
So this morning I posted this on LinkedIn. If you were a chess piece, which one would you be? Put this prompt into ChatGPT. Ask the question, if I were a chess piece, which one would I be and why? When I did this last night, here's what it told me, because it knows me well. Chris, you'd be the knight, no doubt. Unpredictable, strategic, always thinking a few moves ahead and moving in ways no one expects. You're not just playing the game, you're flipping the board where needed and teaching others how to rebuild it with meaning. And so in advocacy, lived experience in life, sometimes it's the unexpected moves that shift the entire game. And I posted several pictures of Star Wars chess pieces on this board, and people are commenting, beginning to comment. They're using the prompt and they're sharing with me what chess pieces they are.
Mm,
And it's actually quite revealing. And it's just another fun thing to do, connecting lived experience mental health with with technology, AI,
yeah,
and Star Wars, and suddenly you've got fascinating conversations going on.
yeah, absolutely. Just out of interest, has anybody been told that they're the pawn yet?
You know what? That's so funny because I was in the shower earlier and I actually thought to myself, if anybody is if anybody's told that they're the pawn, will they have the guts to admit it?
Exactly.
And why would they be the pawn? I was thinking precisely the same. That's so funny.
You are the pawn. You are a sacrificial lamb.
Yeah, right, totally, totally. Oh God, that is hilarious. Yeah.
Awesome, awesome. Right.
Brilliant.
So you've at the outset of the conversation, you've already touched on your your two experiences
Mm,
of attempting suicide. Um, what would like you to do at this point is, could you give the context to that? Could you kind of talk us through how you reached that point,
mm,
and what were those moments along the way that kind of led you down that path?
mm,
And then after that, the question four that we have is, what were the light bulb moments that made you realize that something needed to change? So we'll come to that afterwards. But
mm,
as much detail as you are comfortable sharing on this, Chris, I
mm.
don't want you to talk about anything that you're not okay talking about, obviously.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
I think it would be incredibly helpful
Mm.
for the listeners to kind of hear what you went through and what got you to that point.
So there's a key message that goes through my entire advocacy work, and it's Ripple. And Ripple actually is an acronym that I created when I applied for the Churchill Fellowship last year. And it actually stands for Raising Impactful Practices for Preventing Lives from Ending. And that's Ripple. But actually, beyond that acronym, the Ripple Report, which is the new newsletter that I created April 1st, and the writing that I do, you will see the word Ripple featured quite impactfully. And the reason is for that, Dan, is that through therapy, I was able to actually fully break down all the different life events that led to those experiences. And when I actually spoke to a author about writing a book about this story, he said something that I had never considered before, but I have not forgotten it. And I think he was right. He's not a psychologist, actually. He's just a good author. And he said to me, it was almost inevitable that you were going to go through this because of what happened, because of the effect of everything that had happened before. And after that, I spoke to the therapist about it, and he wasn't wrong because I was born a twin. We're born in Wembley in a very ethnic majority community, not too far from where I live right now. My father, who was the eldest of five children, and my mum had us when they were only 19 and 18. So my father came over from the West Indies when he was 8. My mother came over from the West Indies when she was 16. They met 3 years, 3 years later after she arrived, and they had twin boys. So not only did I have twin boys, but we were living in a very rough estate called Chalkhill Estate in Wembley. My father's parents were, I think, deceased or very close to being deceased. So now he's the, the senior kid looking after this lot, right? Then he's got two boys, and then he's working and he's studying for his degree and his masters, and he even trying to understand the pressures that he must have been under. I can't imagine even having 10-15% of that level of responsibility at that age. But you don't think like that back then, right? You realize it now. But something had to give. And what unfortunately for him, it was his anger. Um, Beautiful looking man. If you had a picture of Muhammad Ali in his prime and my dad in his prime, they would almost look like twins. So a very such statuesque man, beautiful green eyes, which is very rare for a black man. So he was particularly striking, but he had a foul temper and he was very heavy-handed. And so obviously I won't go into the details of what we suffered in the house and my mum suffered, but eventually we came out of Wembley and he relocated us to. So remember this, Dan, we're in a black community, right? Now we've been uplifted and we're now living in Chislehurst, which is a suburb of Kent, all white community. My mum says I can't live there, so she moves out and she moves back to Wembley, and she gives me the choice of moving with her, but I say no, so I stay with my twin and my dad. My dad starts drinking, and I'm not allowed to see my mum for about 3 years. My relationship with my twin brother starts to break up because I'm not an academic. Colin was very studious, so we end up going our separate ways. My dad did the one worst thing he could do as a father when you've got twin boys is he put us into a situation where he wanted us to compete. He compared us, and so with him succeeding and me failing at school, that caused a rift. So now the family unit is completely broken. I'm in a white community, so I've got no access to black people. I grow up with white people. And then I leave, then I get kicked out of school. And then I start work at 17, 18. And then I go through my career into recruitment and I flourish. So identity was an issue because I'd never been out with a black girl, never had any black friends. Then I moved to Asia and live in Hong Kong, Singapore, and China. where I'm one of a handful of black people, and end up carving a life for myself, which was quite extraordinary. Redundancies, failed relationships, da 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 da, betrayal, ex-girlfriend has an affair with best friend. Oh my God. And then, making money, losing money, making money. I mean, really, it's a bloody handful, Dan. Looking at it chronologically, and by the end of it, I couldn't cope with it. It just got too much. And I think when I lost that last job in Singapore, I was working for a company that I really loved. I'd worked there for 3 years, and when I got made redundant, that that for me was the final straw. The credit cards were being maxed out, rent was going up. I'd reached my 20th year in Asia, and you realize as an expat, there's a finite life cycle. If you're not already married or truly localized in an Asian community or society as an expat, you realize it's time to go home. You can't live the single bachelor life for too long. Um, and that's when I realized, that the way out for me was to end my life. And it was when I saw on CNN that Kate Spade had taken her life in New York, and Anthony Bourdain had taken his life in Europe in a beautiful hotel. I started to actually become curious about this. I started to study it. I started to obsess about suicide, and I started to see it in TV shows. Suddenly I'd put the TV shows on, and suddenly I started to hear suicide and see suicide on the screen. Suddenly then, Dan, it went from not really understanding it to thinking, oh, actually, this is a viable solution. This is a viable way out. It's going to hurt. It's going to cause a lot of people pain, but yeah, I think I'm ready to do it. And so I went into it with my eyes wide open. I wasn't scared. I really had enough. It was in many aspects, in many ways, I think, the result of quite a challenging life.
I completely understand why that author made that observation.
Yeah,
It's from your description, it's kind of it sounds like, and I don't want to oversimplify this, but it sounds like the absence of kind of the roots, or the solid kind of foundations for you in the formative years, as you say, had that kind of ripple effect.
yeah,
So the next kind of relationship or the next town that you moved to, there wasn't ever like a thing that you could call this is my stable
mm,
base that I
mm,
think of as the place that I belong.
yeah,
Is that fair?
yeah. No, it is. I mean, I there was one major consistent theme that I realized later on was that the amount of pressure that I would put on myself and my girlfriend at the time, to cling on to her and her family, to put myself as an extension into their family, because I was so desperate to find the belonging, the connection, the love, that every time that was taken away, it was like another part of me was being cut away.
Mm.
And I kept, and you can imagine, I was just trying to replace what I was missing from my earlier life. And when that's taken away, it's like you're starting again from scratch, and it's just so exhausting. And after a while, Dan, you just can't do it anymore. Can't do it anymore.
But as you were just gearing up to say the word exhausting, that's exactly where my head was at. It's
Yeah,
that cycle of starting again and knowing how much work is involved in that,
yeah,
and how much emotional effort you're going to have to put into doing it. Yeah, I can completely understand why you came to that conclusion and why you felt like that was the only viable option for you. Um, we kind of we talked a bit earlier about you kind of realizing that you were struggling to more recently, so 2021, you were struggling to kind of get that focus, to get that energy, to get out of bed, and that you needed that plan. What does that kind of time between the experience that you've just described and realizing that there was something that you could do that would help you to start not getting back on track, but would help to kind of help you to find and define your thing, your purpose. What was that period like?
Yeah, I mean, you, I'm not sure if this is the light bulb moment, but if it's not, I'll tell you, there was, if I think back to late summer of 2021, I'd been through community mental health. They were brilliant. They signposted me to the Brent Recovery College for peer support activity. Brilliant. Bedrock of my whole recovery journey. Still love it today. And then I started to talk to more people online because my LinkedIn profile had been dormant for some years.
Yeah,
And you have to imagine that I was somebody who was in recruitment, of which LinkedIn is the main engine.
yeah,
So if you suddenly drop off, people will recognize that, right? And so so many old friends, old colleagues would be asking themselves in Hong Kong, in Singapore, who knows what's happened to Chris? Where's Chris gone? And only people could say, well, we know he went back to London and we know that he was struggling. That's all they knew. And so I started to talk to some mates in Australia and Hong Kong in particular, both Matts. I've got two very good mates who are both Matts, and one of them said to me, have you thought about writing a blog? And I hadn't. What would be the purpose? So, well, not only will it help people understand why there has been an absence for so long, but because of COVID, people are talking so much more about mental health. They thought that my story would have quite an impact, and they were right because I went on to Medium, and I wrote that blog, and it was called take what was it called? Shining a light on suicide, or taking removing the curtain from suicide, something like this. And it the story was read so many times and it was received so well. People online started to contact me, old friends, new friends, and were saying, we're so grateful that you've decided to share your story with us. It gives us confidence, it gives us hope that maybe we could also do the same. And so that was the start that I realized I had something to say. And then I started to take some courses and do a lot of learning and attending different relatable webinars on mental health and suicide prevention. And I realized then, I mean, I was very quite deliberate about this actually. I said, look, I'm not going to think about this advocacy journey for quite some time. I want to know what I'm getting into.
yeah.
So I started to just sign up to every single online event I could find. And you know what I realized was that number one, I was often the only person of color on those webinars. And number two, you would think by looking at the screen that it was suicide was a problem unique to only white men in their late 40s, right? Because those are only faces I could see. And most of those faces were not in London. They were all outside of London in the suburbs. But yet I was like, okay, I'm going to make these really interesting observations. I'm going to write a lot of notes down. I'm going to listen and I'm going to wait to see if people see me on the screen and ask me for my perspective as a black man.
Mm,
Nobody did. So I thought, okay, that's fine. Yeah, because I'm here to learn. So I don't want to cause any rift here. But after 2 years of doing this, somebody said to me, Because what have you learned from the last 2 years? I said, I realized there's an opportunity here. There's a very real gap that needs to be plugged. And I want to go out and find other black men who have done it. And I did. I had found some men, young and old, who were doing some wonderful work. And I thought, I can do this as well.
Mm.
Yeah, I can do this. But I was combining 30 years of international business experience. This is the potent mixture here. The business experience, the global perspective, the lived experience. Imagine all of this now in a blender. This has become a very potent mix of skills. And that's why the demands of my time have gone up like this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Because there is, yeah. So it sounds incredibly crass to say it's the gap in the market,
Yeah.
but it is, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's the challenge across the board for suicides in the UK in particular is it is men aged between their mid 30s, their mid 50s at the highest
Mm-hmm.
level of risk,
Mm-hmm.
and that is an underserved
Mm-hmm.
community.
Mm-hmm.
So to then look within that community and say, well, actually, if I happen to be black or Asian,
Mm-hmm.
where's my voice? Where's my representation?
Mm-hmm.
How are the kind of the needs that I have served if
Yeah.
the whole group is underserved
Yeah.
and not given the focus that it needs? But this is a really sort of noddy question to ask you, Chris, but for the benefit of our listeners, our viewers, what are some of the key ways in which the issues of mental health amongst black men are um, worsened or made more um, complex than other men?
Living in silence. I mean, I think I lived in silence for a long time. The shame, the stigma. I mean, we talk about things like toxic masculinity across the board, not
Mm,
unique to black men. But we know that on the streets of London, particularly, South London, for example, those black boys are brought up in a very tough, hardened environment. Whether it's gangs and drugs and knife crime, which we know is rife, and stuff like that. And so, you know, you think about when they go into the educational system, they're coming out with less than ideal qualifications. They have very little in the way of um, big goals for themselves or career aspirations and skills to match. So they're already at a disadvantage, and then they start to experience violence either as the violent person in the home,
yeah,
or they get into toxic relationships where their spouses, their partners are also violent, because we know black women are also very strong as well. And you begin to see the cycle of activity that goes from generation to generation, and then you start to weave in all of that is what is the community impact to one's mental health when they walk down the streets, when they walk into a shop, when they're in the school playground. How are they being perceived? That constant pressure of realizing, I'm a black boy, I'm a black man, I'm already lesser than you. And so the power differential is quite acute there, right? And we're talking about the majority here. I mean, I've certainly experienced some of that, but I've found ways in which to tackle that, and I certainly consider myself, because I think, because of my international background and because I've worked and lived alongside so many people from all over the world, I don't necessarily look at this racism aspect my peers will, but for me, we're all equal. We all have a story, and we all look different, and we act differently. That's what, for me, that's what makes the world such fun and interesting. Um, but for your, your atypical black man, it's tough to talk about these things. It's tough to open your mouth and share these deep feelings about inadequacy, failure, not having enough money to pay for your kids, school books, or basic basic human rights. Um, I it's the trauma, Dan, is staggering, and it's also hereditary, because if you look at the issues from the Caribbean, from Africa, right? Slavery, so on and so forth, generations of persecution. Scientifically, it's been proven that through studies that those recurring themes, they ripple through generations. And even though you may not experience it directly, somehow you're still feeling it.
Mm.
And it's quite a frightening thing to think about that, isn't it? You may not be getting the whip across the back, but in a different way, you're still feeling like, as a black man, that you're under the master's thumb sometimes, and you're not there necessarily as an equal. Um, and it's yeah, it's an extraordinary topic to discuss and to read about and write about. Yeah, so I hope that's answered um, the question, Dan. I mean, at first I felt mental health was all about feeling broken, but then I realized it was about constantly rebuilding. I love Jenga, as a game, right? And because you're building the tower and somebody just removes one piece, the whole tower falls, then you have to start again.
Mm.
So I've seen this whole recovery journey of mine as this kind of absurd game of Jenga. They're constantly trying to balance the tower. And just when it's looking like it's rocking, you just have to put that piece back in just to give it a bit of stability there.
I think that's a really interesting analogy because what it does is it tells you that you've got to be prepared for the tower to fall down. And actually, I think that's something that is for many people that haven't been through challenging mental health experiences, they don't necessarily understand that it's not a case of, well, I'm feeling crap, and now I've been through therapy, or I've been on medication, or I've been on this recovery journey, and now I'm fixed.
Mm,
There's a kind of misconception that it's a
mm,
kind of, you were broken, now you're
mm,
fixed.
mm,
Whereas you and I and anybody else that has experienced difficulties with their mental health knows that it's not that you're fixed,
mm,
it's that you've probably learned something about how you might deal with things slightly differently the next time it
mm,
happens.
mm,
So it's never about kind of going from absolute ground zero to top of the tree. It's more a case of, well, I'm going to climb this tree and I'm going to fall down at some points, and I'm going to get back and I'm going to keep climbing that tree again. I'm going to find
yeah,
a different way to do it.
yeah,
And so that kind of that Jenga imagery is really powerful.
yeah,
And to respond to your point, yes, it does answer the question. I'm conscious that I've asked a big question in the context of a wider discussion, but it's one that I feel like if we can help other people to kind of think about that and consider that in the context of mental health, then it's really important to have that
no,
discussion.
absolutely. I mean, I think I'm blessed that one of my best friends in the world, he's like my brother. And we went to school. He was my scrum half, you see, and I was in the second row, and Colin, my twin, was the fullback. So we have a lot of history. And he was a alcoholic and he was a gambler. So for many, many years, and he hit crisis. And but now, 20 years or so later, he hasn't had a drink, he hasn't had a gamble, but he still goes to his AA meetings. He still goes to his, actually less so for that, but he still goes to his GA meetings, his Gamblers Anonymous meetings, and he mentors and he also facilitates. And this is 20 years on, because to our discussion point here, Dan, he knows that he needs to do that to keep that tower from toppling over,
Yeah.
because he could have gone to early intervention and thought after 2 years, I'm fixed.
Yeah.
I'm not going to gamble anymore. But you and I both know you've got to keep it going. So I think that for those of us who have suffered or suffering from some form of mental illness, um, we know that our journey now is with us for the rest of our life. It must never stop, and it will never stop. We have to continually find new ways in which to battle our demons. And my therapist said to me once, Chris, why are you doing this advocacy work around suicidality when you still experience suicidal thoughts yourself? Do you not think that we should have lots more therapy? And when you're ready, you can begin your advocacy journey. And I actually said, sorry to correct you, Mr. Therapist, but actually, I'm because I've been through suicide already. I'm afraid to tell you that it's never gonna escape my brain. I'm always gonna have those memories, and I'm always gonna be thinking at some level about the experience and what another experience might feel like, or how I might tackle that experience, because that is the reality of people who have suicidal thoughts. I'm not saying that I'm thinking of committing suicide tomorrow. No, but unfortunately, when you've been through it, the reality is you still live with it. And so by doing this work, it almost becomes quite cathartic for
Yeah.
me to actually say the words, live the words almost every day of my work, whilst I'm still battling my own suicidal thoughts. It's a strange world that we live in, Dan, but that's the one that I've chosen. And some people think I'm mad, but that's the one I've chosen.
But it's really important though, because in the various different conversations that we've had on Good Enough Chats with all manner of guests, they've said similar things. They've said part of the reason for coming forward and talking about it is that some of these guys are people that haven't spoken publicly about it at all. Some are at the other end of the spectrum, like you, who's
Mm.
out there and very much talking about your experience. Some guys really haven't, who've been on the show, and they didn't necessarily go into the conversation expecting it to be a cathartic experience, but pretty much every one of them has come out at the other end of the recording and said, wow, that's it was good to get that off my chest.
Yeah,
And it is, it's that old the old BT advert. It's good to talk.
yeah,
It's true. It's
no,
absolutely true.
absolutely, absolutely.
Um,
But what I can assure you, though, is after this discussion today, I won't be talking to anybody else this afternoon, because we talked about balance.
yeah,
When when I'm sharing so much with you, it's important that then I have a complete switch off this afternoon,
yeah.
watch some funny TV shows and just have some ice cream and just relax. Maybe go for a little walk because it is quite nice out there. But just to get myself into another headspace is so important when you're doing this kind of work.
Absolutely. I think your observation for yourself that you were doing 10 calls a week and
Yeah.
switch it back to that's, yeah. I do the same when I'm recording these shows.
Mm,
I started off by just kind of getting the calls in whenever people were available. And
mm,
sometimes that meant I was doing two in a day and
mm,
or three in a week. And
mm.
it takes its toll.
Yeah.
It's hard to do that. So I've kind of spread them out a lot more now intentionally so that I can give myself a bit of time to. So I know I'm going to go back. I'm going to listen to it. I've got to edit it. I've got to put the
Yeah.
clips out for it and everything. And you do need to look out for yourself.
No, for sure.
Make that
I'm
change.
saying you're doing a great job.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that, Chris. we talked about pretty big sort of light bulb moments there for you. Your realization that you were the only black guy on the calls when you were going through that experience. Before we kind of go into the final question, are there any other light bulb moments that you've had on this journey that you'd like to share?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I found a quote this morning which I love, and some people disagree with this one, but I want to tell you what this quote is. And it came from Picasso, and he said, "Every act of creation is first an act of destruction." And I think for me to have evolved in the way I have at this stage of my, let's call this the third act of my life, right? For me to have evolved this rapidly, it meant that I literally had to destroy myself. I had to take myself to the absolute lowest possible point and then and then literally have somebody pull me back from the brink and say, now it's time for you to re-emerge as something quite different. And as I've gotten older, I've began to appreciate spirituality a little bit more. I'm not a church goer. I've only ever been in church a handful of times, but I have begun to think that if I look at all the different aspects of my mental health or my mental fitness, my mental well-being, if I have a look at all the aspects from the physicality, the exercise, the diet, and the inner work, the kumbaya, the meditation and the cathartic stuff, and then the advocacy stuff, there is another quadrant which I feel is something that's been missing, and I do want to tap into it when I feel it's the right time, and that's the spiritual aspect. I quite like the idea of spirituality. And I know this is going to sound ridiculous, but when I think about my love and obsession with Star Wars and the Jedi Temple, the Jedi Council, and the ethos that runs through that entire storyline, there is something that tells me that spirituality, believing in something greater than yourself, is very, very important. And I think that if I can start to identify that aspect as well, that's only going to make me more mentally fit. And that's a term that we don't really hear too much in the academic research circles, but I quite like that mental fitness aspect of our conversations. And I think that, you know, that Picasso phrase is, for me, it does stand out. I literally had to destroy in order to create.
Yeah,
Okay. I also realized from a light bulb perspective, being told that I wasn't the only one,
yeah.
being told that, you know, your story is not unique, Chris, and there are others who have experienced similar or similar situations to you. Um, there are others. I think the Brent Recovery College. The first time I spoke to the wonderful admissions clerk, and I said, "What's it all about, Brent Recovery College? What do I have to do?" And she goes, "Well, let me tell you what our mantra is." And I said, "Go on then." And she goes, "We turn recovery into discovery." And the fact that I'm sharing that with you now from that very first conversation I had with her all those many years ago, that was a real light bulb moment for
Mm,
me. Because instantly I felt inspired. I felt, hold on a minute, I'm going to go into a peer environment, learn new skills, be around people with lived experience, but we're going to discover things about ourselves together. I thought that was very uplifting.
yeah. It's
I was very inspired by that. Yeah.
like there's you can suddenly see it's the wood for the trees stuff,
Yeah.
isn't it? It's like you can suddenly see there is a path through this.
Yes.
And you can't see the whole path, and you don't know exactly which direction it's going to take you on, but
Yes.
you know there is a path
Yes.
at that moment. Yeah,
Yes. Yes. I love that. And I still use it today.
yeah. I love that too. Chris, this has been such an amazing conversation. It's been a real privilege to have
Have
you.
we gone longer than we had originally planned?
Well, see, this is the new thing that I'm doing with this, right? Before the initial chats, I'd said to my guests, I think we probably want to shoot for 45 minutes to an hour.
Okay.
But for this season, this is now a podcast as well. So,
Okay.
from my perspective, I'm expecting more people to be listening to this.
Yes. Yes.
So, I think we go as long as the conversation allows us to go.
Okay.
Um,
Good.
so,
Yeah.
and it's been incredibly rich with your openness, your honesty, and I think an incredible amount of really useful experience that you've shared, which I know is going to resonate with other people.
I hope so. Yeah.
There's one last question for you out of the kind of the five that we started off with, and that is somebody comes to you today and they have experienced similar challenges. What's the one thing based on your lived experience that that person could do to help themselves?
I've got four. Can I share them?
You have four. Yeah, we'll take them.
Speak even if your voice cracks. Number two, believing you're being judged is only in your own head because everybody has their own unique set of challenges. Number three, become comfortable with feeling uncomfortable. It means that something positive is happening and it's your body that's telling you, keep going. And number four is don't try to plan too far ahead. Just take each day as it comes and recognize and acknowledge the small wins, and that might just be getting out of bed.
Yeah,
So those are four fundamental building blocks that have helped me a lot to get through this last several years. Yeah.
that's awesome. Thank you. Well, you said you had four. I thought it was going to go for like 40 minutes,
No.
but actually those are beautifully concise
Yeah.
and powerful. I
Yeah.
love those. Thank you, Chris. And if somebody has listened or watched this conversation and they would like to get in touch with you, is that okay?
You know, absolutely. I mean, Dan, feel free to put all my links, URL and your information on your Spotify, whatever. They can have a look at all my stuff I've done. They'll find my LinkedIn profile. They'll find my Blue Sky profile. They'll no longer see me on X because that got kicked to the curb about 3 months ago. We discussed that, didn't we? And I tell you what, the first day I did that, I felt like, oh, there's like 150, 200 people that I may never hear from again. But now, oh, what a weight that's been lifted, I tell you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't blame you. As I said to you before, I gave up on that place a long time ago. I don't miss it. I
Yeah,
do miss it at all.
absolutely.
Brilliant. Chris, thank you again. Thank you. It's been so great getting to meet you, to talk to you, to get to know you a little bit. And as I said before, the stories, the experiences that you've shared today, I know they're going to help someone. And as the kind of the rule of thumb for success with Good Enough Chats is if it helps one person to realize that there are things that they can do, positive things to take control of their own situation, it's worth its weight in gold. The second thing is if hearing you talk encourages more people to come forward to be guests on the show, that's brilliant as well. So that's my call to action, I guess, for the listeners
Yeah.
who are with us at this stage is thank you for listening, watching. If you want to show your support for the show, you want to put this in front of people, subscribe to it on the podcasting platforms, on YouTube. Leave us a review. Leaving reviews really helps, especially on the podcast platforms, to get this in front of more people. Share it specifically with people that you know or feel need to hear it, or share it more broadly on your social medias. All of this is massively helpful. And if you have heard this and you feel like you could come forward and share your story to help destigmatize men's mental health issues for other people, you will have all of my contact details plastered all over everything. Please get in touch. We'll have a chat. Hopefully, as Chris will agree, it's it's a pain-free experience in terms of kind of discussing this and making sure that you're comfortable with it and you know what's involved with it. But the more people we get coming forward, the longer we can keep this going and building that momentum and that bank of content that's there for people when they need it.
Wonderful.
So thank you. Thank you, Chris. Thank you to the audience. We will be back again very soon with the next episode of Good Enough Chats. Cheers.